All right, y'all. I think I'm live. Give me just a minute. Give me just a minute. I'm just making sure. Just making sure. Hold up, hold up, hold up. Okay, just making sure. We're good to go. So, how have y'all been, ladies? I know it's been a few days. Okay. But I have to talk about some things this morning. I really do because I'm observing some things and I feel like I just need to speak on some stuff just for a little while. I'm not going to keep you too long this morning. I know y'all got stuff to do. I know y'all got stuff to do. So, hey, Strink. Oh, boy. So let's talk. Because I really want for us as Black women to think about some things. You really have to wonder how, in a short period of time, some of these platforms have gone from saying that they want nothing to do with Black women. They don't want Black women in their spaces. They feel like, Black women are quote unquote invading their spaces and trying to control the dialogue, to now saying, oh no, we welcome Black women. We like Black women. Like if you really, if you have a day where you just kind of in your bag and you just want to observe some things, you will literally hear these guys on one platform talking trash about Black women. And on another platform saying, oh no, we like the sisters and we appreciate their support. Now, this was something, okay, that my homegirl and I had pointed out maybe a few months ago at this point. And I feel like when we were having some of those conversations, what people were doing, and people do this a lot on social media, but what people were doing is they would pick and choose, like maybe something that was said in a 2-minute clip and ignore the rest of what was being said or the overall message, the overall theme. Okay? Because we told y'all before that a lot of times when people suddenly change their attitude towards you, you have to be careful about that. And you have to wonder how it benefits them to do that. And with a lot of these guys' platforms, I'm telling you, what they're realizing is that amongst any race of people, right, the women are the primary consumers. And it's the same thing with us as Black people. Women, we just have a tendency to be a bit more charitable when it comes to supporting businesses, donating to platforms. And a lot of these men are realizing that in order to have brands where you can really make enough money to solely live off of your social media platform, you can't alienate the women. So they're toning down on some of the anti-Black woman speech. But at the end of the day, if you notice that anytime you go to their channel, whether you're in the chat, the comment section, or the panel, if you notice that anytime you go onto those channels, the person on the platform is allowing people to drag you the entire 8 hours they're live. You're getting timed out over and over again the entire 8 hours that they're live. You're everything but your name and a child of God the entire time that you're live. You have to understand that there's a reason that those type of men feel comfortable in those spaces. I'm gonna tell you what I believe a lot of these Black men on YouTube are doing. If you paid attention during the 2016 election, right? People like David Duke and other white supremacists supported Donald Trump. And they were very clear in the reasons why they supported him, right? Well, then, of course, Donald Trump had to disavow, the KKK and other white supremacists, and he had to publicly say that he did not support their message and that he was not a racist. And when they did an interview with David Duke and asked him about it, David Duke straight up said, I understand why he has to say that publicly, but we understand that his platform will be beneficial to the things that we support. That's what these Black guys on YouTube are doing right now, y'all. They basically understand that they're all on code. They all still support the same message, but for the most part, they're allowing the content creators to publicly suggest that they do not support the more radical individuals in that sector. And you have to really pay attention to that, because even though some of these guys go to certain platforms, and when you listen to them talk, if you've never heard them on their own channels, or you've never heard them on panels with other Black men, you would think, oh, this sounds like a cool dude. This is a good conversation, right? Because they want the collective of Black women to feel like, oh no, these spaces were just created for us as men to have a voice. They don't want you to think about the fact that as soon as these guys got their platforms, their number one priority was to talk trash about Black women. And unfortunately, no one is calling that out. No one's calling that out. And you do have to wonder why that is. You have to wonder why that is. Because, these are not platforms where people are just giving their opinions. Because if that were the case, the marital rates for Black women wouldn't be lower than other groups of women. And our out-of-wedlock birth rates wouldn't be so high. These men are giving a voice to the way that a lot of Black men actually feel. And in some ways, I feel like it's like you're leading lambs to the wolves by helping these men soften their tone. It's like their opinions haven't changed. They still don't value, respect, or appreciate Black women. What it is they don't like the idea that freedom of speech works both ways. They don't like that there are Black women with channels and with other spaces on social media looking at other Black women and saying, you don't need to put yourself on the line for a collective of people who don't care about you. A lot of these guys, after spending years saying, oh, well, Black women need to understand that we have the right to have a voice. After spending years saying that, let me tell you what I heard a guy say. And this was something he said within the past week. He suggested that on these channels where we encourage Black women to be self first and where we call out Black male niggatry, right? He suggested that these channels needed to be flagged. He basically put a virtual hit out on these channels. You have other men, other Black men on social media who are recording the things that we're saying in our videos and on our live streams because they plan to create a YouTube documentary. And in this YouTube documentary, they plan to suggest that the concept of divestment is failing Black children. And understand that a lot of these Black men who are having these conversations, these are Black men who support interracial relationships for Black men. These are Black men who have openly acknowledged, okay, that they have dated non-Black women in the past and have been married to non-Black women in the past. Right? These are Black men who support movements like Save Yourselves Black Men, which I don't care what they call it, but Save Yourselves Black Men is a Black male divestment movement. But now that you have a handful of channels with Black women saying, be self first, all of a sudden it's a problem. These mammies, these manosphere mammies who have spent years saying, oh, well, as Black women, we shouldn't get offended by what these guys are saying because Black men have a right to their opinions. These same women have a problem with Black women giving our opinions if we're divested. These same women will subscribe to your channel to troll you and possibly help these men flag you down, okay? So all I'm saying is don't be fooled by the fact that a lot of these guys are softening their tone. They want your donations. And they know that for a lot of Black men are just not going to be comfortable financing a grown man's lifestyle. That's just the reality. Because they're going to feel like, okay, just like I have a job, you can go get one. So a lot of people still don't understand that a social media platform that becomes a successful brand can be a full-time job. So Black women are going to be more likely to donate to something like that than Black men. And Black women will go onto these platforms, whether it's the comment section, the chat, or the panels. Black women will go onto these platforms and listen to men drag them and other Black women and will leave that experience saying, well, these guys have the right to their opinion, but will then suggest that channels like this should not be here simply because they disagree with us. I don't know if you're paying attention to this whole situation with James Charles and Tatiana Westbrook, but let me tell you what that is showing the rest of the social media community. That situation is showing you and I and others that if you turn on a white woman, not only will that particular white woman pull her support from you overnight, but the collective of white women will do an about face and walk away from you and withdraw their support overnight. Do you understand that other groups of women do not allow themselves to be dragged and do not allow their image to be tainted and then turn around and say, oh, well, I don't see why people get so offended. No, white women got offended by the things that white men in MGTOW were saying. And white women got together with the Southern Poverty Law Center and had the term MGTOW classified as hate speech. So that's why now when you go to a lot of these guys' channels that really are MGTOW, but they have monetized platforms, that's why you'll notice they don't make too many videos with MGTOW in the title because YouTube can demonetize your video for having MGTOW in the titles or the hashtags. You can be demonetized for that. So in the white manosphere, they have found other ways to basically talk about MGTOW, okay, because the women in their group had it declared as hate speech. They said, oh, you're dragging the image of the Western white woman. No, we're not going to sit here and say it's just an opinion. We're going to have all of this declared as hate speech. Okay? And when it was time to get together to do that, the collective of white women got on code. Because see, this is something that other groups of women don't do. Okay? And you can see this in the Tati Westbrook situation. If people look at that situation and they feel like, okay, James really did Tati Westbrook wrong, they don't say, well, that's between the two of them. It doesn't have anything to do with me. No, they say if you do that to one of us, then we're all offended. And like literally in less than a week, he has lost 3 million subs and counting. Now, he'll probably bounce back from it, but he's certainly going to take a little bit of a hit. And this will be a lifelong lesson for him that you don't offend certain groups of women. See, a lot of times as Black women, we wonder why we don't get the respect that we feel like we deserve. Now, part of the reason is because we do live under a system where, we're not the dominant group when it comes to money, power, or resources, or access to any of those things. That is part of the reason. But another part of the reason is because we don't demand respect. We don't require that people respect us. People can drag an individual Black woman or the collective of Black women, right? And if they come back down the line and can spin their narrative in a certain way, we act like we haven't heard 10 years of conversations that they've been having. We act like we haven't seen the data and the statistics that would suggest that what these men are saying on their channels is how the collective of Black men feels. We'll ignore what's going on in our personal lives or in the personal lives of the Black women we know. We ignore all of that. And we're swayed by the narrative. I understand people can do what they want to do on YouTube within the community guidelines. You can listen to what you want to listen to. You can put your support behind you, whoever you want to support. But I'm just here to tell you that people don't change overnight. They don't go from saying the majority of us aren't worth anything to saying, oh no, well, we just wanted a space to vent. They don't genuinely change up like that overnight. There's a reason the narrative is changing. There's a reason that some of these guys have suggested that they don't want women on their channels, but then they have no problem being in women's spaces. They want to be presented to groups of Black women to change the way that we think and feel about them. But when they go back to their platforms, they're not talking about the importance of a solid family and community structure. And the collective of Black women is not requiring that Black men do that. You're not requiring that these men build communities for you and your children. You're not requiring that these men marry you so you don't end up like Lauren London, okay? You don't require that these men marry you. You don't require that they establish a legacy for you and your children. When you have kids with them, you don't even require that they help you financially support your children. You let these niggas shit on you all day long and have the audacity to then turn around and help them drag Black women who disagree with them and help them mislead Black women who do not know the full history of what these men have been saying. And no, we're not going to let it go. Not over here. Because you can cough in the wrong direction on this platform as a Black woman and people never let you live it down. So you don't get to spend years talking crap about Black women, years saying that it's not your responsibility to build for Black women, and then act like you have a problem with these kind of spaces. You don't get to do that. Do you understand when these men are on these channels saying that they don't have a responsibility to the Black community, saying that they don't have a responsibility to build? These are men divesting. And do you understand that because Black men have spent years on social media saying things like that, that they declared open season on Black women and Black children? That's why you keep seeing all of these situations where, you know, whether it's a school security guard or police officers in some situations, you keep seeing these situations where Black women and children are being manhandled and brutalized by the police. Why? Because a lot of these guys have large platforms, and they have gotten on these platforms and laughed when Black women have been brutalized by the cops. You know, when the whole story about Sandra Bland came out a few years ago, before the cell phone recording came out, you had a lot of Black men saying she deserved what happened to her. When the young lady a few months ago was involved in a parking dispute with an intoxicated, enraged white man, when that man pulled a gun out on her and punched her, you had Black men and unfortunately some Black women saying that she deserved to have that happen to her. And you have to understand something. When these people are on here saying things like that, they're influencing the way that the world thinks about Black women in the United States. And that's why these attacks on Black women and children are increasing. Because I don't care what anyone says, and I know, you know, we live in the postmodern era, but the fact remains, it's very dangerous to exist in this world as a woman or a child who has no protection and no support. So you can't on one hand say, oh, you don't feel any concern for Black women and children when we're in these situations, and say that you feel like most of us aren't worth anything, and then turn around and say, oh no, it's just conversation. We just wanted a place to vent. And for the life of me, and I'm trying to say this in a way that is not offensive, but the reality is, for the life of me, I don't understand why so many of us as Black women don't get that. Do you understand that when it comes to each other, right, we can hold grudges against another Black woman for decades, okay? People can get mad at you for something you said, for something they misinterpreted, or for something that, you know, you didn't even say, but you were just part of a conversation that other people were having, and be pissed off with you for years. But when you hear these men repeatedly talk about how much they hate Black women, all of a sudden it becomes, oh, it's freedom of speech. This is what I don't get about the collective of Black people. We only call it freedom of speech when it's Black men talking. But yet we don't afford Black women the same respect. Hey, straight up. We don't afford each other the same respect. And I'm getting to this place, you know, because I guess some Black women have gone onto these platforms and have felt verbally abused. But my thing is this: If you have heard how vile and hateful these men are, if you choose to take yourself onto those channels, then you shouldn't be surprised by the way they talk to you. Because you've heard them say this type of stuff over and over and over again. You've heard them repeatedly say that they don't value or respect Black women. And I don't even understand why you would want to hear the opinions of men who have been unlucky in love and who probably are venting their frustration online simply because they can't get the type of women that they want. Because this is the other thing that bothers me, right? People keep acting like Black women can't have preferences. You do understand that Black men and Black male identified women are now calling colorism preference. You have people who are pro-Black and Black first who are saying that colorism is simply preference and darker skinned women don't want to compete. But here's the thing. When darker skinned and brown skinned Black women decide to try to compete amongst other groups of men and end up in successful relationships and marriages with non-Black men, then all of a sudden we're bed wenches. You're a bed wench, even if you're a Black woman in a relationship or marriage to a Black man, but you respect other Black women's choices. All of a sudden people are calling you a bed wench. So Black women can't have preferences when it comes to dating and marriage. Black women can't say that we have these preferences or that we understand other Black women's preferences because of the experiences that many of us have had with you niggas. We can't say that at all. But you can be a man who is Black first or pro-Black on this platform. You can be in a whole relationship or marriage with a non-Black woman. You can boil colorism down to preference and still be supported. And it's not just Black men that's supporting them. It's the collective of Black women supporting them as well. And suggesting that we as Black women don't have the right to our preferences. I mean, if you're a Black woman and you say that you don't really have a preference for darker skinned Black men, or you don't have a preference for short men, you don't have a preference for broke, dusty men. Black men and their mules will tell you you are wrong for your preferences, but they will take something that was really put in place by a system that initially did not view Blackness as beautiful, and Black men will adopt those same thoughts and then say, oh no, it's just preference. It's just preference. You guys shouldn't be offended. You guys shouldn't be offended. You guys just can't compete. But then when we go amongst groups of men where we can compete, and where we can compete quite well, all of a sudden it's a problem. We're not allowed to have preferences when it comes to a man's income. If you're a Black woman and you say, you know what, I don't want to deal with a man who makes less money than me. I want to be able to be a stay-at-home wife or a woman who works from home. Like, I don't want to be out here trying to chase a whole bunch of money. People will say, oh no, you should give Daquan at McDonald's or Walmart a chance. Absolutely not. But y'all let these men talk you out of your preferences, ignore their hypocrisy, and you never question why, on the one hand, they're very pro-Black male, and in their own spaces, it's obvious that they hate Black women. But on the other hand, you never question, why do these guys feel like it's so important for them to present a certain narrative to Black women? That's true. That's true, straight up. A lot of these social organizations, even if they are groups of Black women prioritize Black men. There are Black women on this platform right now who, when they think about supporting Blackness, they are only talking about supporting Black men. It never crosses their mind to support Black women, or it never crosses their mind to say, well, even though I disagree with this woman or this group of women, they have the right to their opinions. They have the right to feel some type of way about the things that these guys have been saying. Okay? They absolutely, matter of fact, I caught something. One of these guys that likes to record the women in these spaces, right? Did an upload recently. And you had women in the chat, seemed like nice women, but you had Black women in the chat saying, why do they hate Black men so much? Even though I've personally experienced a lot, I still don't understand where they're coming from. You understand, Black women, that as a collective, for the most part, you have a lot of Black women who will have one bad experience with Black men after another, right? And when you have those experiences, other Black people will say, oh, well, it's just because of the men that you're choosing. And for most Black women, you know, we'll feel like, oh, yeah, you know, that's good advice. That's a good suggestion, right? So we won't allow our individual experiences to cause us to hate an entire group of men. A Black man can be, he can be like borderline ugly or just an average looking dude, right? He can be rejected by some beautiful Black woman, and he will spend the rest of his life hating all Black women. And other Black men and Black male identified women will never look at those men and say, well, maybe you just are choosing the wrong type of women. Or maybe, water seeks its own level. Okay. And dude, you just don't have what it takes to pull a bad chick, right? You don't have the looks, or you don't have the money, you don't have the ability to provide, okay? Donald Trump is not attractive at all, right? But he was able to pull several wives because of his money. Jay-Z is not attractive. Although he looks a little bit better now that he's older, but he's just not like, you know, when you think about Beyonce and the men that she could have gotten with looks-wise, he's just not all that great looking. But guess what? He has the money to be able to pull any woman he wanted. So that's what he did. You know, other men understand, right, that if you're average looking and you have average money, guess what? You're only going to get an average woman. And instead of understanding that, and instead of doing what's necessary to get to the place where they can pull the type of women that they want, they get mad because they don't respect the fact that Black women have the right to our preferences and our choices in mate selection. But when it's us talking about the things we go through, yeah, there are Black men on this platform who will say, oh, water seeks its own level. So you can't get the type of men you want because you can't compete. But they never say that to themselves, and other Black women never say that to them. So that's why, you know, those of you who are divested and you have channels, your channels are necessary because we're here to keep these niggas honest. You know, sometimes extremes are important. You know, and then the places that are kind of middle ground provide balance. But extremes are important as well. You know, sometimes a little bit of radicalism is important. But it's unfortunate to me that amongst Black people, if you're a Black woman and you put yourself first and you call out the danger and the treachery that exists amongst the Black collective, people will call that radical and extreme. People won't want to be associated with you because you're viewed as too radical or extreme. Or I'll say it like this, being associated with you will become a liability because you're too radical or extreme. And again, being radical as a Black woman is having the audacity to say, don't sacrifice yourself for a collective of people who hate you. Because these men have made it clear that they hate Black women. I don't care what they say. You don't spend years, every day, hours on end, talking about how much you hate someone, and then try to look at me and say, oh no, that's not how I really feel. We're just venting. Bullshit. Bullshit. And anyone else who doesn't call that out is on some bullshit too. That's true, straight up. Stability is very attractive to women. It's very attractive to women. But you have a lot of these dudes that are just, they're of average income. I'm sure most of us on here are not millionaires, but they expect to be able to pull the same type of women as Black millionaires and billionaires, or men who are millionaires and billionaires in general. These everyday average niggas really expect to be able to pull top tier women. That is the ego and the narcissism of a lot of these men. I mean, I just have to call it what it is. And I'm sorry, y'all, if it seems like, oh no, Leah should give people a chance, but I have to be myself. You know what I'm saying? I have to be Leah, right? And I'm sure that's the way that other divested Black women feel. Like, you have to be yourself. You have to speak to the things that you have observed. And when my homegirl and I were talking about some of this stuff, whether it was on this channel or my other channel, where we were saying, you got to wonder why these men's opinions have changed overnight, and why is it so important for Black men who really don't value the collective of Black women to all of a sudden talk about, channels where we're discussing divestment, or channels where we are discussing interracial relationships or marriages for the channels who focus on that. It's like, why do Black men care about such a small group of Black women? And when we said those things, and when we put that warning out there, I feel like it was taken in a way where people were not respecting that we have the same freedom of speech as these men, that we have the right to speak to our opinions and say the things that we want to say, just like everyone else. It was like people got offended by the conversation instead of really listening to what we were trying to point out. I saw that in different comment sections. I've heard different men online talk about the opinions of certain divested Black women on this platform. So, and it's like, okay, you're offended by that, but you spent all these years saying that all the shit that y'all say is freedom of speech. And then you now have people saying, well, I don't understand why you're mad at me for something I said 5 years ago. And it's like, well, because this is how you built your platform. This is how you got support. You got support at the expense of the Black woman's image. And we'll see, we gonna talk about something else too, how people like to talk about the overly masculine Black woman. I don't know if I'm gonna do this here or if I'm gonna do this in a separate conversation, but we're gonna talk about the fact that some of the first images of overly masculine Black women were actually Black men in drag. If you think about Flip Wilson and Gertrude, Jamie Foxx and Wanda, Martin Lawrence and Big Mama, and Shanae. Eddie Murphy, and some of the characters he played in Orbit. But that's a separate conversation. I'm gonna stick to the topic. I'm just saying. I'm gonna just throw that out there. Yes, a lot of these Black movements were not beneficial to Black women straight up. As a matter of fact, in any situation where you have Black women in any pro-Black space talking about our unique experiences, okay, we were called selfish. You have Black men who were so radical, right? They were radical. They were Black Panthers. And they were saying shit like it's powerful or it's freedom to sleep with white women. They were saying stuff like sleeping with or dating and marrying Black women was oppression. And these people never call that out. You had Black women in the Black Panther movement who were being sexually assaulted, who were being physically assaulted. And when they tried to point it out, they were told basically that it doesn't look good for the movement for you to bring this up. So we're going to sweep this under the rug. And do you understand that that's basically the totality of Black women's existence and struggle, Stan? Since they're now trying to take over the word Blackistan, I got to use some new words. We got to use some new words, ladies, okay? Because we can't let these people try to control the narrative. While they're trying to change their own narrative, they're trying to define who we are. How can you tell me who I am? How can you tell the women in this space what our message is? You don't get to define me. You don't even know who the fuck you are. But again, that's another conversation. But yeah, you had women in the Black Panther movement who were physically and sexually abused to the point where they walked away from the movement. And do you understand, when you think about the way that the Black collective, okay, you think about the way that the Black collective responds anytime a Black woman talks about being abused, whether it's emotional, physical, or mental abuse, right? Anytime we talk about those experiences and the people who violated us were Black men, do you understand the Black collective basically tells us to shut up and deal with it? Because if you talk about it publicly, it makes the collective look bad. That is our whole experience as Black women. So if you're a Black woman who even wants to be able to give a voice to the things that you have experienced at the hands of Black men, you really can't be pro-Black. Because one of the core principles of pro-Blackness, even though they don't say it, but one of the core principles of pro-Blackness is to uphold the image of Black men at all costs, including at the cost of women and children. And this is why when that whole R. Kelly situation came out, you had men saying, oh, they're trying to make all Black men look bad. Why? Why would you take on the image of R. Kelly for yourself? Are you saying that R. Kelly's actions represent the collective of Black men? If not, then you would have no problem with him being called out. But see, they were more concerned about R. Kelly's image because they viewed his image as an extension of the overall Black man's image, that they didn't care about those girls who were sexually violated. Just like they don't like you to talk about stories where Black men have been or were molested as children by other Black men. Do you understand that this is why, from what I've seen, no one in a pro-Black space has said anything about Common? Last week, Common acknowledged that when he was 9 or 10 years old, he was molested by a family friend, a man. I think he was visiting his godmother or aunt in Chicago. And I get the impression that the person who molested him may have been like a teenager, so like an older child. And notice that no one who identifies as Black first or pro-Black has talked about that. Why? Because then they'd have to acknowledge that part of the reason that a lot of Black boys grow up to be emotionally unavailable and sexually frustrated is because they're violated as boys by other Black boys or by Black men. But they had no problem talking about child molestation when it came out that R. Kelly and his brother were molested by their sister. See, because that played into the Black women are so evil narrative. But when you talk about the fact that based on the statistical evidence, the data overwhelmingly suggests that when Black boys are molested, they are molested by other Black boys or by Black men. You hear radio silence. Why? Because they are even willing to protect the Black man's image at the expense of even Black boys. So that's why they can spend years declaring their vile hate speech as freedom of speech, and then have the audacity to put a virtual hit out on divested channels. Oh, I have heard 2 Black men say, and I'm not going to say the name of the person they're talking about because I really try to avoid saying names over here, okay? But you basically have Black men now saying that they feel like they have to keep an eye on divested Black women's channels because they feel like certain channels have grown to a point where their message cannot be stopped. So now they're paying attention to pretty much everyone's channels. And so it's disingenuous, in my opinion, for these guys to say that the things that they're saying is just conversation. Because of what they're saying is just conversation, even though they're really dragging and just really, frankly, slinging mud at the image of Black women. If what they're doing is just conversation, then they shouldn't be triggered by what we say over here. They shouldn't be concerned about it. And they certainly shouldn't be suggesting that these channels should be flagged. Let me look at the chat. I know I've been talking for a minute. That's very true. You're right, straight up. We do have to understand that Black men are not going to choose us, simply because we share the same skin color with them. As a matter of fact, for a lot of them, I'm telling you, one of them came in my comment section over here on one of my older uploads and really said, why would a man choose a top tier Black woman when he could get a top tier white or Asian woman or a top tier Hispanic woman? So understand something, Black women. They don't even see value in the Black women who, have the looks, who have the shape, who have all the things that they say they like. They still view those women as less than women of other races. As a matter of fact, I'm telling y'all, in the very recent past, they were making videos saying that, Black women who are everyday average women shouldn't have expectations of men because they were saying, well, even the top tier Black women get cheated on. That's what they were saying when Jay-Z went on his public apology tour to acknowledge that he had cheated on Beyonce. They then used that to point out that Halle Berry and Beyonce's mother had been cheated on. And they said, well, these are the best of the best Black women, according to Black women and what they support. And, they love to throw Oprah in too. And yet all of these women have been cheated on. They thought the shit was funny. They didn't have conversations about why some black men are such trash that they don't even value the highly sought after black woman. They laughed. They thought it was funny. Hey, Dolce Vita. Yeah, J. Edgar Hoover did have a lot to say about certain black men. Yes, Dolce Vita, there, at least since the days of the Black Panthers, there were pro-black men that promoted black men being in relationships with white women. They publicly promoted it, might I add. And even if you think, I don't know if you heard about what Nick Cannon said recently, but Nick Cannon basically said something very similar to that. As a matter of fact, if you even back to like the 1800s, Frederick Douglass, his first wife was a black woman, and he was married to her for quite some time. Hold on one second. Okay, Frederick Douglass's first wife was married to him for quite some time. And when she died, he married a white woman. Frederick Douglass, who had been a slave and had escaped slavery, who's viewed as this great figure of blackness, married a white woman. Yep. But so, yeah, this whole thing about them only selling black love to black women has been around for quite some time. Yeah, straight up, black women should have abandoned those movements a long time ago, simply because, as women, it's not safe for us to fight certain battles. Particularly when you have a collective of men who've made it clear that they don't support you in these fights. You're basically putting yourself in harm's way. And secondly, a lot of times when black women do get on the front lines of these movements, and you see a lot of these protests on TV, you'll notice that most of the people at the protests are black women. You're protesting for a group of men who are suffering some things at the hands of the system that they are oppressed by, but then they refuse to stand up for themselves. A lot of them don't believe in voting, and they won't go out and protest for their rights. They won't lobby politicians. So I feel like, why should we as black women fight for people who won't fight for themselves? You know, it just doesn't make sense to me. And anytime you have these black women who have stood on the front lines of these movements, the black men will say, oh, you're emasculating us, or they'll say they don't like the people leading those movements, because that's one thing they were saying about Black Lives Matter. They were like, oh, well, it's a bunch of black women and people in the gay community. And it's like, well, okay, if you don't like that group, start your own. You know, find other groups to support. But don't just sit there and laugh at the people who are putting their boots to the ground. So that's why I say, you know what? There is no way I'm protesting for a group of people while they're sitting on YouTube criticizing me for it. Sorry, guys, my allergies kicked in, so that's why my voice is going in and out. You're right, Dolce Vita. You're right. The gig is up. That's true, straight up. I do think it's jealousy. They don't like to see top-tier black women being able to date out. You know, it's funny because they tell black women to compete, and then when we compete amongst a group of men who tend to get married when they do find a woman that they're compatible with, then all of a sudden it's a problem. Hi, Miss American Pie. That's very true. That's very true. If you look at the data, single woman, you're better off not throwing all your eggs amongst the pool of Black men. A lot of those guys just want to, a lot of Black men just want to continue their genes. So we give our womb, we give men womb access so easily. So we'll be in relationships with men and we'll have children with them. We'll bear their seed and will not require them to marry us and establish a legacy so that there's something to pass down to those children. And so for a lot of these men, as long as they're able to have children, they don't care about marrying Black women. I'm telling you, most of the Black men that I know of who are married to non-Black or biracial women, I'm telling you, they have at least one child with a woman who carries the Black phenotype, so a woman who is clearly Black, so that they can have at least one Black child. I have heard dudes, listen, I'm going to just say it like this. There are men who obviously don't have a preference for Black women, like dark-skinned or brown-skinned Black women, but they'll have like 1, 2, 3, or 4 kids with brown and dark-skinned Black women. Why? Because you want to keep that gene pool going. A responsibility to be concerned about legacy. So we can turn this around very easily if we did certain things, but you know how it is on YouTube. If you say things, people will spin it in a way to create a certain narrative. So I'll just say it like this. Black women, you should not be having children with any men who don't respect you enough to marry you. And of course, if it's a man that you don't want to marry, then you wouldn't want to have children with him anyway. Now, if marriage doesn't matter to you, that's fine, and I'm not talking to you, okay? But for the women who care about marriage, I'm telling you, we could turn this shit around very easily. And the younger generation of Black women are doing that. Because, see, you have all these states talking about abortion bans. Understand something. The abortion rates have been going down since at least 2006, and they've been going down amongst all groups of women, including and especially Black women. And part of the reason that the overall abortion rates are going down is because the groups of women that generally had higher abortion rates are having fewer abortions. So Black women are having fewer abortions, and women in general in the age 20 to 24 age group are having fewer abortions because overall women are having fewer unplanned pregnancies, particularly younger women and girls, like, maybe like 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds. They're having fewer unplanned pregnancies, and even millennials. So women who may be like into their late 20s and early 30s, they're having fewer unplanned pregnancies. So we can turn this shit around very easily. Just stay on birth control until you meet a man who's willing to marry you. And once these men realize that if they as a collective don't start marrying Black women and creating a legacy for Black children, they will fucking not have a genetic line. They'll change their tune very quickly. That's very true, Miss American Pie. Frederick Douglass's first wife did help him obtain his freedom, and she also helped him, in the early part of his career when he was working with the abolitionist movement. But, you had a man who had every reason to be pro-Black and pro-Black family. But what did he do? He married a Black woman, had a bunch of kids with her. And when he was older and he had established his legacy and his first wife died. He married a white woman. And so the control of his legacy is now, was managed by a white woman. All of that work he did in his life flowed right back into whiteness. And people never call him out on it because, again, pro-blackness is simply about the promotion of the black male image. And so, a lot of pro-black women get offended when they hear divested black women express discomfort with them. But that's why, because even pro-black women are programmed to ignore their own trauma and the trauma of other black women, because everything is about protecting the black male image. Yep, that's very true. His wife was a free woman. She was a free woman who helped him get his freedom. And when she died, I think it was Eldridge Cleaver who said that access to the white woman's genitalia represented liberation. As soon as Frederick's first wife died, he pulled an Eldridge Cleaver. That's very true, straight up. We should not be protesting. Hey, Tassie Lori. Yes, they use black women as breeders. And when we see, and these are the same men who drag single mothers. These are the same men who drag single mothers. But if you are a black woman who encourages younger black women to avoid single motherhood if you can, because these guys get a thrill at creating single mothers. I just want y'all to know that. I know that sounds a little bit extreme, but these guys like creating single mothers, and I'm going to tell you why. I know y'all are like, this girl is crazy as hell. But the reason they enjoy creating single mothers is because I've heard men say, that sometimes they are selective about who they have children with. So some of these men are purposefully making you single mothers. And see, it's some women that these men know they don't want to marry. But if they have a child with you, they have access to you for 18 years. Because they can see you whenever they want, and they can use that child as an excuse to see you. And because they're around so much, they can keep other men who actually would want to marry you and establish a legacy for you and your children. They can keep those other men away. And these men know the way that other black men think. So they know that when they make you a single mother, when they are so irresponsible with their Johnny Appleseed, and they don't wear a condom, and you're not on birth control, so you're both being irresponsible. And when they put you in that situation, they know that they're pretty much going to have exclusive access to you while the child is young, because there are going to be certain black men who are going to be uncomfortable, dating women with really, really young babies. So these guys know what they're doing. They make you a single mom and then leave you broke. Let me tell y'all something right now. If there is a man who created a child with you and he left you alone to raise that child with no financial support and no help in raising the child, that man hates you. And you should stay away from him at all costs. Think about how much someone has to hate you and the child they created with you to not care about how your child eats, how your child lives, or your ability to provide for that child. A lot of y'all are laying down and having children with men who hate you. I told y'all this before. I saw this in the comment section before, where men who had children were black men who had children with black women were straight up saying that they're only staying with those women until the kids are 18 and then they're out. So some of y'all who have been, say you've been with your baby daddy, because I know one of my friends that I go to church with, she's a sweet girl. And her baby's daddy have been together literally for like 16 years. 16 years, 3 kids, he has never married her. She doesn't realize that man actually hates her. And once those kids are 18, he's probably going to leave her and go get with whoever he really wants to be with. These guys were literally in this comment section saying, oh yeah, by the time my kids are 18, I'll still be under 50 and, you know, I can still go out and pull a younger woman. And by then I'll be financially established because I haven't had to pay this woman child support. Or you have guys straight up laughing about the fact that, yeah, you know, that girl has me on child support, but I'm not paying it. A man who doesn't care about how his child eats hates that child and the child's mother. Okay? That's true, Tassie. Thurgood Marshall, Julian Bond, and a lot of them got a pass. Yes, Miss American Pie, he was cheating on his first wife. She literally helped him get his freedom, helped remove him from the condition of slavery. See, this is why I keep telling y'all, you can't be too nice to niggas. You simply can't do it. You simply cannot do it. Unless they show you that they are worthy of your niceness, and unless they are a man, listen, who can improve your life situation, it's not worth it to be nice to niggas. She was nice to him, had children with him, and died an untimely death. And he did all of that and married a white woman. Mind you, this was in like the 1800s. Because there were parts of the country, particularly if you were like in the north, and maybe parts of the west, where black men and white women actually could get married. Frederick Douglass was a bed wench. I'm not gonna go too far with that because I don't want us to get trolled today. But he was a fucking bed wench according to these men and their definitions. But see, they'll never call that out, right? But if we found out today that Harriet Tubman had a white husband or a white boyfriend, they would overlook the fact that she was literally leading hundreds of black people to freedom, that she literally was a nurse and a military spy during the Civil War. They would ignore her entire body of work and the work that she's done for the Black collective, and they would call her a bed wench. You notice why a lot of pro-black people don't talk about certain women from the Black Panther era, because some of those women ended up marrying non-black men. Oh, but you can be Eldridge Cleaver and say that access to the white woman is liberation and you can still be supported. But certain other women, they ignore. Yes, Miss American Pie. Future, listen. Future will never get over the fact that Sierra was able to level up. Never. See, that's why Future had dissed Jay-Z, basically saying he was out of touch. And so Jay-Z's response, it was a song he did where he was talking about how he didn't want to lose his family, you know, during the whole cheating scandal. And he was like, first he said something about don't go Eric Benet, you know, talking about how Eric Benet cheated on Halle Berry. And then he took a dig at Future because he was like, you know, you don't want to mess around and see another man playing football with your son. You know, Future is mad about that. He is so mad about that. And these guys on social media, instead of calling Future out for being a reckless sperm donor because he has so many children, you had people basically, people were acting like Sierra was like LaQuisha from the hood, who had like 18 kids and, was a trap queen. They were acting like she was so undeserving. And it's like, okay, this is a beautiful woman, a talented woman, a millionaire in her own right. And now she's married to the highest paid man in the NFL, and these hoes cannot deal. And it's just so funny to me. And yes, Miss American Pie, that's why they hate, that's why they hate CK. As a matter of fact, I have seen guys in comment sections talk about how beautiful she is, and how uncomfortable they are with her message. Because see, y'all don't understand. Well, y'all understand, those of you in the chat, those of you who are divested Black women, you understand. But the collective of Black women really don't understand, okay? The dark-skinned and the brown-skinned Black woman is supposed to be the Black man's backup plan if he can't go out and get the type of woman that he actually wants. We're supposed to be the breeders of the race to carry on the Black phenotype into the next generation. And we're supposed to be their fallback plan when they're old and broke and have ED, okay? That's what we're supposed to be. And you know it because these men spent so many years laughing at the fact. They would say, oh yeah, there are a lot of eligible Black women in certain parts of the country because they can't get married. Oh, they can get married. They just refuse to open up their options. They refuse to try something different, okay? Yes, straight up. Broke Black women do need to stop procreating with broke men. Listen, let's talk about a very basic thing that women have understood since the beginning of time. Okay? If you're smart about how you date and marry and about who you give access to your womb, your female essence can literally improve your station in life if you're smart with how you use it. Okay? Right, Dolce Vita. They get to continue the bloodline and continue to create Black males. They get to do that without doing the basic things that other men understand that you normally have to do, which is create a solid family structure for that woman and your children, and marry her and establish a legacy for those children. This is why you don't hear about too many white celebrities dying without wills, like Prince, John Singleton, and Nipsey Hussle. But we're going to talk about Nipsey Hussle later. Yes, Frederick Douglass pulled, I don't know what B. Smith's husband's name is, but Frederick Douglass did exactly the same thing that B. Smith's husband is doing now. When his wife was sick and on her deathbed, he moved Becky into the house. See, a lot of your favorite Black male civil rights leaders, according to the way these Black men on YouTube define bed wenching, a lot of your favorite Black male civil rights leaders were bed wenches. They were hot in the pants for Becky back in the 1800s when niggas were getting lynched and tarred and feathered for dealing with Becky in certain parts of this country. Oh, but they have the audacity to be mad about, the Loving case. Oh, that movie promoted interracial marriages for Black women. Okay, but y'all had been doing that at least as far back into the 1800s. Literally, there were certain parts of the country that if Frederick Douglass went into those places with his white wife, he might not make it out. Use the Black woman to get his freedom and have children with her. And she was like a brown or dark-skinned Black woman, according to the pictures I've seen. She had very strong, beautiful black features that many of us as black women have. And he used that woman. He used her and completely disrespected her even while she was on her deathbed. Yes, Dolce Vita, they continue the bloodline with no accountability. They have even guilted a lot of black women into not requiring child support. And these are not rich men. They act like getting child support for most of them, will be collecting the bag. Let's be serious. Most of the time, it's just a few $100s. But the point is, you should be contributing to your child's upkeep. Men who get mad about financially supporting their children hate their children. That's something my dad told me. He was like, any man who can have a child and not care about how that child eats or keeps a roof over their head doesn't love their child. A lot of these men actually, they hate their own seed unless they actually like the woman. They hate the child, but yet they want the child here because, giving a man children basically is a form of immortality, okay? Because you're allowing him to continue his bloodline into the next generation. And yes, Tassie and Douglas did die with a broken heart. Very true, straight up. Some black women were doing it. But as far as I know, you didn't have black women as prominent as Frederick Douglass who were doing it. And when we hear, if you think about the Ancestry.com commercial that was pulled, right? When we hear these stories about how black women used marriage as a way out of slavery, people say, oh, that woman was a bad wench. They don't point out the fact that maybe that was a woman who felt like her only way out of slavery was to marry, a white guy. They didn't view it that way. They view her as being a bed wench. But they never say that about the black men who, once they got to certain parts of the country, or, sometimes a lot of black people who escaped from slavery would go up to Canada. They never would point out that a lot of times once black men got out of the South, if they were in an area where they could do it, they were marrying white women. Hey, Miss J. Yep. Because they want 1 or 2 kids with black women. And then when they deal with non-black women, they want children as well. Because these idiots really believe that, their children with non-black women are black. And I've noticed that black women who have biracial children really teach their children to understand and respect both parts of their identity. They don't really try to insist or force blackness on their children. If their children are, black in another race, they're like, yes, you are part black, but you are also part this. And remember those guys that were having a toast to having light-skinned babies because they were, having kids with white women? I mean, it's just very sick. Oh, that's interesting, Miss J. Okay, you're giving us some of, date and sleep with non-black, but have kids with black women. Yeah, that's what they want to do. See, that's why they're so concerned about the abortion bans and they think abortion should be banned. But see, a lot of them are misinformed and they're ignorant about that issue. So they don't realize that abortion rates are going down because fewer women are having unplanned pregnancies to begin with. And so the next thing to keep an eye on is whether or not they try to limit women's access to birth control. Let me tell you something. There's no way these men should be forcing motherhood on black women when they refuse to marry Black women. And to me, when you get rid of abortion access and access to birth control, you're forcing motherhood and single motherhood a lot of times on women. Oh yeah, I see your point, Miss J. That's a good point you made about I would say that about any channels like that, not to comment, because a lot of those guys, they have Black male supporters who love to see people going in on Black women. I mean, they love to drag Black women, even the Black women who are their supporters. You will see Black guys in comment section saying, well, you can't even trust the women who are so-called supporting you. You know. I'm glad you caught the hangout too, Miss J. I know it's a bit earlier than what I do, but I had to get all of this out of my system. So the overall thing, ladies, you know, you can support anyone who you want to support. But just understand, people's opinions don't radically change overnight or in a short period of time. So if you've seen these men spend months and years talking about how much they don't like, don't trust, don't value, and hate Black women, that's how they feel. And when you hear their narrative changing, think about why it's changing. Think about why it's changing and how it benefits them for that narrative to change. And me and my homegirl, we said it before, a lot of it is just for branding. A lot of it is for branding. You know, certain talking points are gaining ground. They are gaining traction. And so a lot of those guys don't want to be called out for who they are. You know, they want to be able to package themselves in a certain way so that they can continue to get support from Black women and be monetized. I've literally seen Black men go from saying they don't want Black women on their panels to accepting donations from Black women. And it's kind of like, if you make a donation, you can be on the panel, or if you make a donation, they'll mod those Black women. But at the end of the day, if you think about the fact that, okay, just a month ago, these same guys were saying they don't want Black women on the panel, that's how they feel. Hey, Queen Sagittarius. Yeah, lack of productivity is unattractive. And listen, I get what you're saying. You know, I think that women should not give sexual access to any group of men who are not willing to provide you with a family structure, and not a family structure where you have to struggle and work 3 jobs, because sis, you can do that on your own. But I'm talking about a family structure where you and your children can be provided for. And establishing a family structure also means loving you enough to have their will in place so that when they die, you know, you and your children will not be left poor. You know, that is part of family planning as well. But again, I'm going to leave that to my 4 o'clock live stream. Miss J, there are a lot of Black guys who feel that way. They really believe that whoever a Black man has a child with, you know, is fine because the children will be Black. And I'm like, well, if that's the case, then why do you have a problem with Black women who are in interracial marriages? Because if having one Black parent makes you Black, then it doesn't matter if the Black parent is the mother or the father. Hey, Slim Goody. Okay, straight up, that's good. You know you're being watched and you don't care. Yes, I do think they are being supported by Black men in high places. I do. Yes, Miss J, they switched up not to get flagged and for donations. They haven't changed their opinions. Okay? And if you are a pro-Black woman, in my opinion, because since they can talk about swirling and divestment, we can talk about pro-Blackness. Fuck how you feel about it, okay? But if you're a pro-Black woman, in my opinion, you should insist on the prioritization of creating a solid Black family structure. And if you are a pro-Black woman, the Black family structure should be Black wife and Black husband. And if you are in a space where Black men are talking about pro-Blackness and they are saying that you can have, that men who are Black can have children with any race of women, you need to pull your support. Because otherwise, what you're doing by supporting these men's channels with your views and your donations, you're helping their channels grow, right? So that's giving them ad money. And you're giving them your donations, and they're taking that money and they're giving it back to whiteness, right? They're taking your pro-Black money and giving it to the white woman that they're laid up with. White, Mexican, Asian, non-Black, okay? If the bitch ain't Black, then when I say white, that's what I'm talking about, okay? And I don't, for the life of me, I'm like, I don't understand why I even have to have this conversation with these people, y'all. Like, why do we have to tell them? If you're a pro-Black woman, the prioritization of your children and your image it should come behind nothing else. Okay? Because that's pretty much what pro-Black men do with pro-Black women. They look at pro-Black women and say, you're not pro-Black or Black first unless you're laid up with a Black man. But again, Black women who, from what I've observed, Black women who are not divested don't require that men create a family and community structure for them. So I'm not going to argue that for them, but I'm you know, since we talking about it, I just want to point that out. Right, Dolce Vita? Stop giving men immortality if they're not creating a family structure for you. Do you understand that for women since the beginning of time, marriage and womb access has been our ticket to financial comfort. It's been understood in pretty much every culture. It's been understood that if you want the EPA exclusive punani access, okay? If you want the EPA and you want the womb access, okay? You better marry me. You better have somewhere for us to live. You better have an income. And you better be able to take care of us and our children. And anything I bring to the table is just extra. And do you understand? Because people keep saying, well, Black women shouldn't expect that because of the circumstances we're under. Do you understand that even in that era after slavery, the Reconstruction era, and even in the Jim Crow era, you had Black men who were sharecroppers, who worked at jobs. When a lot of times when you worked as a sharecropper, you worked from sun up to sundown and you got a few dollars a day. You understand that there were Black men in parts of the South who did jobs like that and supported their families? Do you understand that back in the day, let me tell you something. My great-grandfather on my father's side, dirt poor, spent most of his life working as a sharecropper in the deep South. And he literally built the house that he lived in with my great-grandmother and their 7 kids. And took care of that family on a sharecropper salary. There was no minimum wage. There were no, types of health care. There was no system in place to at least try to fight for your legal rights. These men literally had nothing and learned how to build houses. They would walk miles a day to and from work and didn't use any of that shit as an excuse not to financially support their wives and children. Okay? So wherever Black people are today under the system we're under, it's nothing like what it was in the 1800s and early and mid 1900s. Now, in some of those cases, the wives did have to work. Maybe they watched other people's children, they were seamstresses, but there were quite a few women who were being financially supported by men who were sharecroppers. So these guys that actually have jobs making a decent amount of money have no excuse not to find a way to financially support a wife and some children. They just don't value the collective of Black women enough to do it. Yes, Miss J. A lot of them do eat it up and they repeat their talking points. Yes, honey. Good point, straight up. You said a lot of these Black men are mad at their mothers for their upbringing and take it out on Black women. I'm not carrying someone else's burden or taking on their demons. Absolutely. Because these are the same men who will look at a Black woman who's been through sexual trauma. Maybe she was sexually molested. We have seen the statistics that show, I think it's either 60% or more of Black women have been either sexually molested or otherwise sexually assaulted by the time we're like 18. And yet, when these men come across a woman who might be emotionally scarred, these men say, oh, it's not my fault you went through that. So you're right, straight up. We shouldn't be taking on their burdens. Right, Miss J. You are the seed of your father makes no sense when you leave the child with the mother. In a lot of cultures, the belief is that you are actually the seed of your mother. Okay. Yep, Dolce Vita, we do have to value ourselves. We are worthy of love and devotion. Yes, we are not just walking uteruses. But that's how, these guys literally drag single mothers. They use a woman's motherhood as a weapon. But then when you say Black women stop having children outside of marriage, these men get upset. You would think that they would agree with that message since they spend so much time talking negatively about Black women who are mothers outside of marriage. But see, they don't like you to tell Black women to have standards before you give a man the EPA. They don't want you to have standards because they're selfish. They want to carry on their genetic bloodline without actually having to even support the child, much less you. Yep, Miss J, pro-Black means pro-Black male. Hey, hyper fanatic. Yeah, I have to find a way to say stuff so I won't get flagged. You know what I'm saying? I don't want my channel to get knocked down. So I got to be really careful about how I say stuff. Yeah, Miss J, we get no leeway for our circumstances. Yes, they spend so much time comparing us to other races of women. They like to compare us to Kim Kardashian and all of these other chicks. And it's like, well, if we can be compared to other races of women, we can compare you to other races of men. Matter of fact, we should do that. That would shut that whole conversation down very quickly. Oh, that's true, straight up. They have nothing to bring her into. Very true. Yes, Queen Sagittarius, they work so hard to take care of men who care nothing about them. And that's why I'm at the point like, if you're a fully grown woman, much luck to you, sis. Okay? Because I am not going to be more concerned about people than they are for themselves. You know, if you're a child or you're like a young woman, you know, maybe you're under 30, or even say you're over 30, but you know, you're willing to listen, that's cool. But I'm not finna get into no back and forth argument with these people. It's like you by all means continue to live in your misery if that's what you enjoy. Just don't try to encourage other Black women to do the same thing. Do you understand that when you're dating, you shouldn't need, this is why I came up with the EPA, right? Because when you're dating, you shouldn't even just be dating one man at a time. A lot of these men will straight up tell you that they are single until they propose to a woman. Okay? I'm telling you, we could turn this stuff around very quickly, but the collective of Black women, you know, on the one hand, it's beautiful to see that type of compassion, but on the other hand, it's sad because the collective of Black women is so compassionate when it comes to Black men that a lot of Black women don't even care about their own well-being and their own security. Okay? Thanks, Dolce Vita. Yeah, if you like the conversation, please hit the thumbs up. I know some people like hit the thumbs up after they've heard the entire thing. You're like, wait a minute, let me make sure. Which I get it. But yeah, I appreciate all of you guys who have rated the video. That does help. I think it helps with the, getting people to the video. Yep. Kim K did buy her whole body. Yeah, we shouldn't be standing up for anyone where it doesn't benefit us. I'm telling you, all these Black women stood up for Jeremy Meeks, and look who he ended up with. Okay? Very true, Queen Sagittarius. We cannot compete with desperate women who are willing to do anything for nothing in return. See, this is the thing people don't tell you. You made a good point. This is why when it comes to the collective, it's not a fair competition when it comes to dealing with Black men, because you're dealing with a collective of Black men who don't believe that they have to provide a family structure for Black women. And then you're dealing with a bunch of Black women who don't require it. And so a lot of times as a Black woman, if you insist on having a solid family, and marriage is important to you, you will automatically not be considered by the majority of Black men. So you almost have to date across racial lines, or if you're a woman who happens to be naturally attracted to Black men, at least say, okay, you'll date Black men, but also date other races of men. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, at least expand your options, because if you're a woman with standards, there is no fair ground competition when it comes to the Black man. They don't value marriage and they don't value family because they're not required to. Black women don't require Black men to do those things. So, that's very true, Hyperfanatic. We're not treated fairly, and Black men allow non-Black women to get away with certain things. And again, part of that is because other groups of women require, unless they're like dusty women, because there are, listen, a lot of these dudes on social media, they're getting the low grade, bottom shelf Becky, right? But the women who know that if they date multiple races of men, they will increase their likelihood to get married. Those women have standards, and those women, they would call a lot of the conversations that Black men have about us, they call it slut shaming, or, they would call a lot of that conversation abusive. They've actually done studies that show that Black women deal with more emotional and verbal abuse than other groups of women. So a lot of the things that are said to us are actually abusive, but as a collective, we don't view it that way. Other groups of women don't allow it. Oh, that's an interesting point. Yeah, we can't expect other people to stand for us if we don't stand for ourselves as a collective. I think divested Black women do a very good job at standing up for ourselves. Unfortunately, other Black women don't do that. Yes, Dolce Vita, those who don't hear must feel. They must feel it and experience certain things on their own. Right, straight up. I get that he was mixed, but I'm just pointing out that Black women put him on a pedestal, and look at who he ended up with. Dolce Vita, I understand. I think a lot of Black women a lot of us were conditioned to be race first. And yep, after listening to the talking points, you saw the extent of the manipulation. And then for me, it was after observing certain things, and in my real world and also on social media, that made me realize like it's simply not beneficial to put yourself on the line for people who won't support you at all. For people who literally will distrust you simply because you are a Black woman. There's no working with that. If you walk into a situation with a man, okay, whether it's a business relationship or a dating relationship, if he automatically has certain preconceived notions about Black women, the situation is dead on arrival. Okay, his dad was MIA. That's interesting, Miss J. So he was kind of like Drake. He was raised by his white mom. Dad was out of the picture. Hey, Dorothea. Yeah, Miss J, it does take a long time to deprogram. Very true. Very true, Queen Sagittarius. Sagittarius, excuse me. We did lower our own value. And I do believe even if more Black women were willing to date out, Black men would have to compete. And for the Black women who do not want to date out, if they required marriage and a solid family structure, if enough Black women did that, Black men would have to compete. Because they have to provide that to deal with even just the average woman of other races. Yep, make men compete and you will see Black males change. Very true, Queen Sagittarius. I agree straight up. I think the numbers are increasing. Delphia, Jeremy Meeks, the guy they were calling Felon Bay, he's like a mixed dude who's, what do you call that picture? Like jail picture went viral. And when that picture went viral, there were so many women, including Black women, that just were fawning over him. And he ended up with a lily white girl, but he did good for himself because she's a billionaire. He left his white wife for a white woman with more money. So he was a Dusty, right? He was a Dusty. That's true, Dolce Vita. Even for the Black women in Black relationships, if you have an overall collective of women who have standards for men across the board, regardless of the man's color, who require marriage, okay, who will not give you the EPA without an engagement ring, without a ring and a date, as one of my best friends says, right? You don't get the EPA without a ring and a date set. If more of us did that, a lot of this would change very quickly. Yes. Yes, Queen. Black women with doctorate degrees are willing to date ex-cons simply because they're Black. Mm-hmm. Because people like to point out the rare examples of, Black men with that background who are able to turn around and make a lot of money. But women of other races with doctorate degrees would never. They would never date an ex-con unless he was very rich or came from a rich family. Straight up, you said he's a white man with a tan. That's true. That's true. My understanding is that, yeah, because you talk a lot about how the race is with the mother. So you're right. If he's the product of a white mother, so technically he's not Black. Delphia, you said any woman who lusts after felons is not well. Very true. He left her, Miss J? Oh, he left her and knocked her up. See? And that girl, even though she's a white girl, she's a mammy. Because why are you a billionaire, dealing with the ex-con? And, that's another conversation we're going to have one day once I get my thoughts together. But, men are very good at knowing the difference between the women that they want to sleep with versus the women that they want to settle down with and marry. And, if you're just going to be giving the V card out willy-nilly, at least protect your situation room. You know what I'm saying? You don't want to leave that situation with anything that you didn't come in with, whether it's a child or an STD, okay? So if you're going to give the V card out to a man who is worthless, protect your situation room, and don't let him leave you with nothing that you didn't have when you got in the situation, okay? But to me personally, like I said, a woman of billionaire status should not be dealing with men who aren't at least millionaires, right? Because when you're a billionaire, you have access to a lot of wealthy men. And, I'm sure that there are some of those wealthy men that, can please you in that way without having to deal with an ex-con. Yeah, Delphia, ex-cons going straight is pretty rare, especially if they're, some of these guys are into their 40s and 50s, still doing certain things. So it's kind of hard to change at that age. I have seen guys, if they got into trouble in their teens and maybe into their 20s, I've seen some of those guys change. But even then, if you have access to men with more money and more materials, you should throw the other guys to the wolves. And I'm going to tell you why, because sometimes men of means can find it unattractive for you to deal with certain type of guys. They view it as risky, and so, yeah. But if you insist on doing it, like I said, don't let him give you nothing that you didn't have when you met him. You didn't have any diseases when you met him. So protect yourself so you won't leave the situation with a disease. And you didn't have a child with him when you met him. So don't let him leave you with one, okay? That's true, straight up. The white mammy can't afford her child. Yep, that's true. They can afford the child, so at least the child's not going to be in a situation where it's impoverished. Yes, Dolce Vita, we got to educate the younger women. And we can't let them forget that as soon as these men had access to social media, soon as these niggas got a smartphone, they created YouTube channels to talk trash about Black women. And we also can't let the younger women forget about the fact that, unfortunately, that there were a lot of Black women that, financially supported these men. Okay? We cannot let them forget, because we do not want the next generation to see the same marital rates that this generation and previous generations dealt with. We want to see future generations of Black women being loved and respected and valued. And we want to see those future generations of Black women requiring and demanding respect. Okay? Because we often talk about how we're the original woman, right? You hear that kind of conversation in pro-Black spaces. And if we're the original and everything else is a carbon copy of us, how are you going to let a bitch that's copying you outpace you? You going to let all these other races of women outpace you when it comes to access to men and wealth and resources when you're the original? Do you understand? A lot of white people get tans, right? But do you understand that a lot of white people also value the look of like the Scandinavian white people, the very pale looking, perhaps with blonde hair and blue eyes or maybe red hair? Do you understand that the reason that white people value that look is because for them, that is a representation of pure whiteness? So we as Black women, and saying this doesn't mean that you devalue anyone else, but we should value the pure representation of the Black woman. And there are light-skinned women who have very clear and obvious Afrocentric features, right? So we should value our original features, our bodies. We should value all of those things. Our hair texture. Now, you do what you want to do with your hair, but I'm just saying we should still value the images that represent us as women in our most original form. And we should really walk in that power and say we are the original woman. Our womb, was the bearer of the world's first humans. Everything after us is a knockoff. So you're not going to push us to the side. You're not going to disrespect us. And we're going to require that you not do it. And if you can't respect us, we're going to go where we can be respected and valued. It's really that simple. And it shouldn't be an argument. And it really shouldn't be a long, drawn-out conversation. The conversation should be, respect me or I'll find someone else who will. Period. Yeah, African women do a great job with, our natural hair textures. Especially because you see a variety of hair textures in Africa. So some of the women have very, very coarse hair, and then some of the women may have hair that's not as coarse. So it's the full spectrum. That's very true. Every other race of people value their culture. Their men create the culture and the women follow. Black men don't value their culture, so a lot of Black women don't either. That's true, Delphia. And honestly, listen, you know, since these men like to talk about how much they lead, then we should hold them to that. This guy I was talking about just made a video. But you know, we should hold them to that. You're the leader. So since you're walking away from the Black family structure, it's not our job to uphold it. That's very true, Queen. There are a lot of the good hair, bad hair conversations, even in 2019. And I'm saying, even if, you know, I know in some situations it's easier maybe to not wear your natural hair, simply because we know that in certain job environments it's not allowed, right? Because of certain laws that have been put in place. And then honestly, if you have longer natural hair, when it comes to maintenance and upkeep, for some women, some days it's easier, you know, it's easier to do something else with it. But I'm just saying we should value it. So even like white people who are more olive toned, and maybe they have dark hair and dark eyes, they still value and respect the image of pure whiteness, you know, that image of like the Nordic or the Aryan or whatever. Unfortunately, you don't see a lot of Black people doing that with Blackness. Other groups of men value the original image of their woman. Black men don't do that. That's why they're toasting to the light-skinned babies they're about to have with non-Black women. And that's why they believe that they can create children without Black women. You know, even if you haven't been around YouTube long enough, you have to understand something, okay? You have to understand that a lot of these guys were saying that they could create a quote-unquote better breed of Black women with non-Black women. They spent years saying that. So that's why, you know, you see the title, Niggatry and Changing Narratives. That's what they're doing. They're not sincere in a lot of the stuff they're saying, okay? But anyway, I'm going to get off of here. I have a few errands to run during my break from work, and then I'm going to be going live at around 4 p.m. Eastern time. I want to talk about niggatry and estate planning. Why do so many Black men fail to have wills? And the reason I'm having that conversation is because you notice in these situations where, say, a Black woman dies, she dies due to an accident, an illness, or, you know, maybe she's the victim of domestic violence. And a lot of times when those Black women die, if they need GoFundMe to pay for their funeral or to help with some of the expenses for their children, a lot of Black men point out how irresponsible it is to have children and not have anything in place for them, right? So we're going to talk about why is it that there are several Black male celebrities who were millionaires several times over, and when they died, they didn't have a will in place and had nothing in place to manage their estate. And we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about how that ties into Timbuktu and Mansa Musa. So I hope to see you guys this afternoon. Thanks to everyone who has participated in the chat. I really enjoyed the conversation. You guys really add a lot to the conversation for me. So thank you so much for being here. And I also appreciate everyone who will be watching the playback. If you have anything to add to the conversation, please leave it in the comment section below. All right. I will talk to y'all this afternoon. Y'all have a good day.